Hello, this is the Blast Report podcast on all things blasting. My name is Evan Thibaud with New Wave Consulting, and I want to thank all the drill and blast teams along with those supporting them who are out there on the pattern. The production team at Blast Think and I would like to welcome you to today's episode of the Blast Report podcast. This episode of the Blast Report podcast is brought to you by Dyno Nobel. For over 150 years, Dyno Nobel has been a global leader in the commercial explosives industry. With origins dating back to Alfred Nobel himself, Dyno Nobel provides historic leadership in explosives, serving the mining, quarrying, civil, and construction industries. As one of the largest players in the industrial explosives business, Dyno Nobel's vital role in helping customers is highlighted across the world. From safety initiatives, development in bulk explosive technology, and meeting KPIs, Dyno Nobel understands the needs of their customers today and into the future. It's their full line of products and services that challenges the status quo and delivers on their promises. So when you need groundbreaking performance, you trust Dyno Nobel. Well, welcome to the Blast Report podcast, Phil Porter. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for coming on our show, and we really appreciate you setting up some time for us in this interview. Your name has been brought up a few times by some people as a person who should be on the show, and I want to figure out why. So can you tell me?
Probably the biggest reason I was in it for almost 40 years
and actually longer than that. My first introduction to the business of when my father started doing it, I was 5 years old.
That's good, eh?
The first memory I have of it is Alex Sinuels, who was the Hercules sales guy in Western Pennsylvania at the time. Had a jobber, which is what they called distributors back then, that had actually committed suicide. But the family wanted to sell the business, and he had been sent over to Ohio by Hercules to find somebody to take over the business. And my dad had part ownership in a gas station at that point, and he happened to stop in at the gas station. They struck up a conversation, and Alex convinced my father to go out on some shots, and my father fell in love with the business, so he sold his partnership in the filling station, and a loan from his father ended up investing in this jobber business, and that's how it all began for me.
Wow, that is a unique start of the story there. Just at a gas station on a long straight road in Kansas.
No, it was in the middle of it. No, it's not in Kansas. This was out in Ohio, which is where I'm originally. And it was in London, Ohio, which is central Ohio, and it was right in the middle of town. It was a marathon station, and I really can't tell you how long he was doing that. I don't think it had been that long, but it happened kind of quick, and he made the change, and it's the rest, as they say, is history.
The rest is history. So how long was your father in the business before you kind of got into it?
Well, what work I did work with him. I worked for him for summers. That you got to remember, that was before the ATF. That was before MSHA. That was before lots of the regulations that control everything like they do now. But I officially joined full-time the company then in 1976.
So that was a way of saying you started when you were about 15 years old.
Yeah. Well, I kind of thought back through the years. I did my first mixing of ANFO at the age of about 9.
Wow.
Because my job, they had a 55-gallon barrel of fuel oil, and they didn't mix it beforehand. They would just take empty plastic bags of ammonium nitrate. They'd open them up on the shot pattern, and you'd go in and pour half a gallon of fuel oil on top of the AN and let it kind of seep while you were drying up the holes. And then by the time they were done doing that, then they would start pouring the ANFO down the hole. there was a lot of smoke on the shots back then. It wasn't a really good mix, but that was how they did it and how they were doing things.
Yeah, unbelievable. I've heard a few stories of people hand mixing their ANFO back in the day. That's a good thing we don't have to do that too much anymore. And so that was tying in with det cord.
Yeah, no, they were using a lot of electric blasting.
Electric. Okay.
That's there again. That's what Alex. When I was 5, I remember sitting on the tailgate of a pickup truck, and he had a pickup truck full of electric blasting caps that he had brought in from the Pittsburgh area over to have my dad get rid of. And he sat there and gave me a safety lesson, telling me that if you mess with this and hit it with a hammer, it'll blow your fingers off. And if you take them and stick them in the plug-in in the house, it'll blow up, and who knows what it'll do. Scared me to death.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it did bother me because I'm sitting there handling them, and he's trying to explain to me what they do.
Now, what was that? Was that pretty much when you were a teenager, you decided, all right, this is what I want to do? Or was there a specific moment that you knew you were like, hell yeah, this is it?
No, I was a reluctant person into the industry, actually. I wasn't going to do that. I went to school to be a teacher and a football coach. And when I got out of school, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunities. And my dad's company, he was expanding at the point into the Iron Range of Michigan. So he wanted me to go up there and just keep an eye on things for a while he was getting his feet wet, and while we kind of broke in a new manager up there. So I was up there running a bulk truck on the Iron Range, holes bigger than I was almost. They were 17 to 21 inch holes. And Hercules had an operation there that was making perchlorate mixed slurry explosives in a on-site mixing truck, and they would mix it right by the hole and pump it in the bottom of the hole, and then we would come in after that and dewater the holes and fill them up with ANFO.
Interesting. Yeah, that's some nasty stuff, that perchlorate.
Oh yeah.
So 20-inch boreholes.
21-inch boreholes up on the Iron Range.
So you'd pretty much just empty a whole truck in one hole or 2 holes?
It wasn't that much, but it was a lot. Yeah, there was a lot of explosives that went in there.
Goodness.
The first day I got there, we were putting together an AN bin, and I remember it was September 13th, 15th, something like that, and I'm kind of dangling off of a crane trying to bolt in the legs of this ANFO bin, and all of a sudden it starts spitting snow. And it snowed. When I left then that next June, middle of June, there was still snow piles on the ground that had not melted yet. So I was up there not quite 1 year and 1 winter, kind of the same thing.
Get me out of here.
It was unique. I actually, kind of enjoyed it. There were some days that were colder than I wanted to be outside, but that's what they all did up there.
Mm-hmm. And so you were a start. And what was your father's company? It was a Hercules company.
The Hercules genre distributor. Right. Yeah. It was the Ohio Dynamite Company.
Mm-hmm.
And he had expanded and bought out McKenna Explosives in southern Michigan, and then they convinced him to go on up to Ishpeming and pump ANFO into the ground for the people up there,
and get some bulk product in the ground. So what was it? Your father, he kind of learned on the fly. Was it interesting learning from your father, or was at the beginning? Were there some interesting stories that you had of those days of what it was like slowly growing from where your division was all the way up to operating bulk trucks in the north?
Oh yeah, it was a big jump. I mean, the first expansion happened when I was still in high school, and because he was more central Ohio and the quarries and the construction that was going on in that general area, and there were some opportunities up in Northwest Ohio. And so he had a couple of 3, 4, 5 employees at that time. So he left most of them behind, and he took one guy, Lee Christie is his name. And he had met him in one of the quarries that he serviced. And Lee had come to work for him. Lee was from West Virginia, stubborn old redheaded Irishman. And he he and Lee moved up to Upper Sandusky, Ohio, and opened up a new site up there. And that was when I was a junior in high school when we moved up there, and they did that expansion. And then during the summers, even from the time I was probably 12, I was either out helping load or unload trucks or do different things. The 50 pounds of bagged ANFO or the 50 pounds of dynamite in boxes was probably almost weighing as much as I was at the time. But all you have to do is get them on the roller, and they kind of take it from there.
I was gonna say, I was like, if you were a big football fan, you probably was good workout for you in the summers.
It was good workout, yeah.
Put on some pounds of muscle carrying that many bags.
Back then, I was probably 140 pounds if I was wet all over. So
that's me right now. So if you were to say any like big lessons that you learned earlier in your career, what would be some of those? Any specific one you can think of?
Well, you think back, and he had a guy by the name of John Lay that worked for him when we were in Upper Sandusky. And I don't know where he met John or how John came to work for him, but John really had been trained by someone on the science of blasting. And I remember there were certain ledges that were 50 to 80 foot high. And John was one of those guys that before he would ever blast, he would go down in front of the face, and you'd be throwing the tape over, and he'd be hollering back and forth when to pull it up, put it down, so that he could identify different seams and different rock structures. And I remember my dad was always really good at reading a rock face, and I learned that from those guys as to how to look at a rock face, what you're looking for, what to identify, and then how to change your load according to that.
Nice.
There are too many people now, and I realize they do it now with drones and sending it in, having computers kind of tell them where to put holes and how to change things. But it's been a practice of mine. You always go look at the face before you get started.
Start out with the tape measure over the
over the edge.
Mm-hmm. And it takes some of those people who started out with that basis, and then you watch them, perform their art, and they take their time and they look at things a little differently, and you always saw that there's some better results.
Yep.
Are there any hard lessons that you learned earlier in your career?
Always take extra money with you when you're driving a truck. I was 16 at the time, and probably about to turn 17, but they had a bulk truck out at Parker's Ford I can't remember the name of the town right now, but anyway, it's a town out by Philadelphia, and they had an old 58 International bulk truck that they wanted me to drive out there to leave and then pick up a newer truck. It was a 1976 Ford, and drive it back home. I mean, that's probably an 8 to 10 hour drive. Well, going out, I didn't have any problems at all with the old International. It ran like a charm. And I got in that Ford and I came back, and it was starting to get kind of nightfall a little bit, and the lights started flickering and doing funny things. So I pulled over. I'm on a turnpike. So I pull over and I get the garage I run into, and we try to charge it. And that seems to work, and I drive further, and I got to get off at the next stop because the lights are flickering again. And anyway, I ended up getting stranded on this turnpike, and I had 10 cents left in my pocket, and the only thing I could do is call the local Ford garage, and they sent out a truck to tow me back into town. And then getting to the owner of the Ford garage, I had a company blank check that I had with me, but he wouldn't accept me writing on it. So I'm stranded there until my dad can get off shot, get home, and then have a conversation between the two and arrange to fix the truck. Because what had happened is, sitting in that yard out there with all the all the wiring on the truck had just gone to crap. Nothing would work.
Rust,
Everything
fully
was
rusting
out. So I learned then to always have some extra money, squirreled in my pocket somewhere, somehow.
Yeah, under the sole of the
Because
shoe.
being stranded with no money is not a fun thing.
Especially on a turnpike, man. They won't let you off.
No.
Park off the
Yeah,
side.
the guy that was towing it, he said, he came up to the toll booth and said, looked at me like I had money, and I looked at him and shook my head and said, I only got 10 cents left. He wasn't happy, but he did it, and then the garage paid him back when he parked it in their yard. But that was an interesting little day.
Yeah, right. Especially at 16, 17 years old.
Oh yeah.
So after your time up north, you're more than comfortable around a blast pattern and bulk product at that point, right?
Yeah.
And you've already started to see a few different applications. You've shot iron ore. What was it mainly when you started? Was it construction, or was it in the coal mining industry or quarries?
Quarries.
Okay.
Quarries.
And you didn't really do much in the coal mining business because the coal mines would do it themselves?
Well, that's my experience with Ohio coal. Really came then after I moved back to Ohio, and my dad wanted me to get more sales experience. So I tagged along with a guy by the name of John Tucker. Was the Hercules sales rep basically in Eastern Ohio, and I spent a lot of time with him. And we were all focused on the coal mines almost exclusively. Got to know Richard Walker, who developed the sequential timing machines for electric blasting cats. Used to go to his shop once in a while we were out there, and worked on the Central Ohio coal, which is where the Big Muskie is.
Mm-hmm. And
also did work, I think it was a consolidated coal mine, Cadiz, Ohio, out in Eastern Ohio. Big mining operations. You get used to being around union blasters and things like that, and being on big patterns again, and doing a lot of bulk stuff.
So 2 questions on that. One, you got some stories about what it was like getting used to being around union blasters. And then part 2, just so I don't forget, what was that like using the sequential timer for the first time and seeing the results of those blasts versus what you were previously doing?
It was, at that time, for me, it was complicated because I just had not, it was so much timing, and it took me so long to actually figure out a pattern using sequential timers. It was different, but that was the rage in the industry at the time. And so everybody was doing it, and everybody was making efforts to utilize it.
And the results were seen immediately in the blast from just viewing the blast?
Well, and I think that, and if there were probably so many complaints from the large blast and the large blasting. When I was up in the Iron Range, you didn't get many complaints because everyone either worked for the mine, worked for people who sold to the mines, or had relatives that worked at the mines. So you didn't get a whole lot of complaints.
That's right.
About big blast and vibrations.
That's right.
Things like that. You get down to the coal mines in Eastern Ohio, and there were a lot of complaints every day. You're destroying my house is coming down, et cetera, et cetera.
And that's what.
And that was at the forefront of the U.S. Bureau of Mines and their initial studies on the effects of vibration.
Absolutely.
And then how do you affect the effects of vibration? What can you do?
Mm-hmm.
That's where guys like Richard Walker really came in and made a huge difference.
And the results spoke for themselves. And could you kind of see that in the cast as well, or were you mainly doing choke blasting in most of your situations?
I would say mainly choke blasting, because that's where every one of these mines had those huge drag lines, and so they really didn't want to move stuff that much. They wanted to keep it in place so that the machinery had a pad to work on and that they could actually do what they needed.
And that blasting method came quite later, right?
Yeah,
okay.
A lot later.
And when it came down to how you managed entering into a union operation, some of our listeners have worked with unions and some haven't. Some, and there's lots of talk about that. Do you have any stories there of grievances that were pulled against you, or it didn't really make a big impact other than dealing with some contracts? Or do you have any advice on how that would How you
Well,
maneuvered through that?
it really didn't have a lot of effect on me personally or the company until they went on strike. The yeah, even later on in my experiences, I mean, they were kind of gruff, but then again, it was like when you find and go anywhere, you've got certain people that are just friendly and other people that are just rough and tough and gruff, and you run into both, and you just kind of have to deal with both, how they want to be dealt with, basically. But in all these operations, they always had a pit boss and a mining boss and a dragline boss, and so those are the kind of people that you were doing most of your interaction with.
Okay.
And in most of the big companies, they also had an explosives superintendent or an explosives manager on the operation that was kind of in charge of. Lights. One sec. Got it.
Okay.
All right. Spending a lot of time in the coal mines, and then all of a sudden, the coal miners go out on strike. 110 days worth of strike. And
Wow.
and that just about broke the company and my dad. He was managing, to work through it, but there was so much cash flow and so much going on in the coal mines because of the high volumes that it was tough. And it was tough, not just him, but anyone that had any coal in their portfolio of sales was in the same world of hurt. Anyway, about that time, Hercules came out. Don't know who came up with the program or why it was, but they were offering $1 million interest-free loan, and this was middle 1970s. Well, let's see, 78-ish. Zero interest loans if their area sales managers would buy up these distributorships and or jobbers or whatever you want to call them at the time, and create large, more geographically centered and geographical scope distributorships. And my dad was very good friends with his Hercules area manager or regional manager, Don Westmus. And Don and he got together, and then they brought in Fred Drury, and the three of them formed a partnership and bought out my father, who was distributing in Ohio, Michigan, a little bit in Indiana, but not much, and bought out another distributorship out in Western Illinois called Explosives Inc. That was in Western Missouri, Illinois, and parts of Indiana, and formed it and combined into one large distribution group.
And what was that one?
That was Econics. And Econics lasted for about 10 years. The name lasted longer than that afterwards, but it was quite the organization.
Okay. And so was that the time when your father moved out of the business and retired, or did he go?
No, the three of them kind of ran that company.
Okay.
Don lived in Chicago. My dad stayed in Ohio. And Fred, who was working for Hercules down at the Bessemer plant, Bessemer, Alabama, which was a large plant, and I think his claim to fame was he had developed or had been involved in the development and marketing of their slurry explosives at the time. And he and Don had a relationship, and so Don convinced him to come on. And the two of them moved into the offices up in Chicago, and they needed someone to go out west, and they all looked at me and said, "Guess where you're going?" And they shipped me out as a 26-year-old wet behind the ears kid, and shipped me out to Pittsfield, Illinois, a little town out in central Illinois. And so I ran out in 78. I was out there and kind of had to take. The guy he was selling out and just didn't want anything to do with it anymore. And his main administrative woman called up my dad and said, "Somebody's got to get out here and do something because nobody's in charge right now." So they shipped me out there, and I just kind of took over and did what I had to do to keep things running, keep the ship going, until the organization kind of got organized the way it should have.
And you stayed with this company for a while, or what was the moment that you kind of decided to move on and do your own career?
Well, at that point, I ended up focusing my energies onto what they call the mix plant or the mixing plant. And one of the adventures there was during the winter of 1985. That plant caught on fire.
Oh no.
Blew up. It was a scary deal.
Oh.
Went out there, and in the middle of the night, it was on fire, and we got some notifications, some calls that the mix plant was on fire. And I go out there, and the fire trucks had showed up to the entrance, which was about a half a mile or to 3/4 of a mile back to where the plant was. And I jumped on the front truck, and we kind of slowly went up to investigate. And it was just, the building was kind of burning, and we knew that there was a chance things could blow up, but didn't feel that threatened at the time. And went up, and we were watering down the AN bins and the fuel bins just to make sure they didn't get too hot. And all of a sudden, I looked down, and my boss happened to be with me at the time, Don Westmus, and I looked down, and an ANFO trailer that was in the stall being loaded and was partially loaded at the time was starting to spit. You could kind of see little flashes of something, and we used a lot of raw grade aluminum in some of our ANFO at that time, and it was probably that was spitting. And we just kind of looked at each other and said, we got to get these people out of here, and got them all out. And he and I were kind of walking our way out, and all of a sudden it was this loud boom, and the cloud went up into the air. It wasn't a full-fledged detonation, but it was what's called a deflagration. But it looked like a mushroom ball fireball that went up in the air. And then everything just went solid black. You couldn't see anything because you'd look up at that fireball, and then all of a sudden you hear this plop, 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 plop. And it was pieces of metal and pieces of the trailer or the truck that was falling around. Felt like Chicken Little. I mean, you just kind of went there and you kind of spun around in a circle until he reached out, grabbed me by the arm, and said, Phil, it's already too late.
Yeah.
So you just hear this plopping around you as the equipment's coming down.
Oh my God. This was probably before the don't fight fires with explosives and all those warnings and everything. I mean, the fire department being there at the gate was probably a good thing for a while. And they had no idea, let alone you guys. Was it, what kind of plant was it? Was it just an AN plant?
It's an AN plant.
Okay,
yeah.
So you didn't have to worry about like the fudge point of
No.
no. Okay,
It was just, will the AN catch on fire? Which it wouldn't. It would really kind of melt more before it catches on fire. Or would the fuel tank and the fuel system catch on fire and do something? And that was about it. I mean, it was a high efficiency plant. I mean, we had gotten, I guess at that time we were probably, I don't think we had gotten up to our record numbers, but after we rebuilt it and built a high speed operation, we were up to between 1 million to 2 million pounds of ANFO product out of that plant a month. And we were cranking out. Back then, that was before bulk had hit the coal fields, and we were making packaged bags of ANFO in cylinders, kind of the snakeskin polypropylene outer bag and polyethylene inner bags, heat sealing them and shipping them off to the coal mines, and they were rifling those down 50 to 60 foot holes.
2 million pounds of,
and just pound after pound after pound.
Wow. Yeah, that's no small plant there. And so you think in the root cause analysis, you think the aluminum was adding the extra heat? And thank God it did deflagrate and didn't obviously it did take off eventually. How was the crater and what was it?
The crater was probably, it was probably about 5 foot around, and at the deepest point, maybe 2 foot. So it was kind of on the surface more than anything. And two theories is, one, you had some product that had come down and gotten confined, or it was the rear end of the transmission end of a the plant tractor that was there that was hooked up to the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows? But it
Good thing
Scared.
everyone was safe, huh?
yeah.
Like that. And you guys, I mean, walking away, you know, there's that goofy song from SNL, "Cool guys walk away from explosions." I can see that's you two walking away, and then all of a sudden that,
Uh-oh.
yeah, and dropping around like flies, you know, just running around in circles, and that's a that's an intense
It was a
experience.
scary deal.
Yeah, that probably had an impact on you, you know, throughout the rest of your career when it came to process management and flow, and
Yes.
setting a precedence there on maintaining the proper technique and processes.
Exactly. Well, and then that kind of followed me a little bit because in '88, Econex sold out to what was then Irico, became Dyno. And I hung around for a little bit and then moved. They gave me a job out in Kansas City, which is where I live now, as a technical rep in the area for mains explosives and some others around the area that were selling the Irico, Hercules, the ex-Hercules products and Irico products, etc. So came out to this area for a while, and I was out here for maybe, what was it? It happened in November, maybe 6 months. And that's when they had the trailer explosion that killed the 5 firefighters here in town. And so it was like reliving the thing all over again.
And what was the root cause of that trailer fire?
Arson.
I did not know that. Okay. And so somebody came and purposely lit that on fire downtown?
Yeah, it was in an area where they were doing highway construction.
Uh-huh.
And it was in Kansas City, but it was kind of in an area that was, because there are woodsy areas even in the city proper of Kansas City, and it was in an area and it was buffered up against a rock face, their storage location, and it was far enough away from everything that there wasn't danger to outside people. And if the firefighters hadn't gone up there, then they wouldn't have died. If they would have just let it burn and even exploded, everybody would have been okay.
And they found out who did it? Was there some neighbor who didn't like the fact that they were expanding the highway or something?
There's still a lot of theories and a lot of things. I think there were some people that were found guilty of arson. There are so many theories about who, why, what started that fire, and there's still questions about it. The effect of it was, though, that finally nationally the fire departments started training their people on how to identify and how to stay away from certain fires and how to approach them. And I spent the next year and a half or more going around and educating not only firefighters, but also our own people, our own customers, people that use the product, and city council members and different people around in different areas. There was an effort to get rid of all explosives within the city of Kansas City for a while. And some of the suburbs were, we need to get rid of all dynamites, or we need to get rid of all this and all that. But you can't hardly build anything in this general area. I mean, some spots you can, but everywhere it's got some kind of rock, shallow rock around that you've got to remove. And that kind of calmed down, and you had to go through that whole process of making sure everybody was using their heads and not overreacting.
Is that kind of why the city of Springfield, Missouri doesn't allow blasting? Is that? Or
it could be
something totally different
than that, yeah.
Okay.
You know, some of the times, if the fire department is the people in charge, they just don't want to have to deal with it. They don't want to have to deal with neighbors complaining, and then them having to explain to them, well, they're within their regulations, so there's not much I can do.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't want to hear it. There's still some of that.
I gave a presentation in one of the conferences and talking about how, you know, there's so many opportunities just to kind of divert in the conversation here, but since we brought up the subject about how, now that we don't fight the fires involving explosives, but a lot of times, you know, operators might not even be using both fire extinguishers before leaving the scene. So I personally think that there should be a point where you do fight the fire to an extent, but not the firemen who show up later or the emergency responders who will
That's
show
right.
up later. I think that there's a huge responsibility on the people who are the operators or the blasters who are around that to see what's going on and to do everything they can to stop it. I've heard of some blast crews emptying their truck and then pushing the truck off the pattern and or over the berm that was on fire, or disconnecting the trailer that's on fire and then driving the other trailer. So it was a dual trailer. They drove that one away. And it's not in the United States. We have aluminum truck beds instead of steel, so that that can get hot faster and add to the container if it's a bulk truck instead of the steel, or there's not a barrier between, let's say, the braking system versus the bin. And some people even talk about of actual fire suppression system on the trucks, just like you'd have a race truck, and that's
Yep.
not necessarily standard. So what were some of the conversations that you guys had back then when that was first part of the realized? Some of that technology didn't quite exist yet, but what were some of the things that you guys worked through in that situation?
Well, the main thing is, if and that's what I used to tell all my guys is okay, you've got a fire extinguisher there. If unhooking the battery or using a fire extinguisher, if that is going to stop it from spreading, then by all means do that. But when that doesn't work, then you've got to clear everything out. It's quick thinking, quick reaction without panicking, and then after that, it's using your common sense and what you've been trained to do. I remember a driver was driving in Indiana one time that had worked for me, and I forget what happened, whether a tire blew or whether he got off on the shoulder too far, and it rolled the truck. And he had broken his arm or dislocated his shoulder. I forget which it was now. But I remember him telling the story of where he had to fight off the EMT guys because he knew the firemen were coming, and he had to be there to make sure they understood what to do and what not to do. And, that's the kind of things that you got to have someone around that does know what they're supposed to do and when it's time to leave, when it's time to get out.
Mm-hmm. To make sure that truck was not going to be on fire or something before he was taken away by the ambulance. Oh, interesting.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I think that there's definitely some progress for us as an industry and how we deal with that even today, and equipment that can be put on the trucks, or how people handle it. Now, that's a good question. Kind of go forward into that. What is some safety technology you've seen grow in your time? Obviously, that's a huge window that you've been in the industry, but let's say something quite crucial that happened earlier on in your career, and some proper safety equipment that you saw utilize it, like let's say fall protection when you're loading the bulk bin, and how now it's pretty standard that people have to use that to get on the top, or you even have to have a second person there in case you do fall, second person to recover you from that. Is there some sort of technology or equipment that you thought was quite revolutionary in the blasting scene for safety there?
Well, I think the advent of non-electrics was one big thing. I mean, and that changed the industry in a significant way, where we almost went completely away from electrics to non-electric. Now we've switched back to the electronic, still a little bit different, but because I think you've got safety built into those detonators. That was one of the biggest things that I saw had a huge change on the industry as a whole. And, the ability to be able to put those out, line them up, not worry about all the wires and twisting wires and sequential machines and everything. You could just go out and clip, and and be able to even change after you get started and unclip it and do it a little bit differently because you didn't like the way it was going to come out.
Mm-hmm. When you went, were you still at Irico when the non-electrics came your way, or had you
Yes.
already moved towards Dyno, or what was that? What was the shift that happened there?
Well, Irico was still selling electric detonators and didn't have their own non-electric when Ensign Bigford was getting very popular. And I worked with some of the Ensign Bigford guys here in town with their detonators, learned how to use them, etc. before Dyno really had their own. That transition was pretty standard around Kansas City pretty quickly, really. And it was, people here in town like Dave Creek who were very involved in that. Now, Dave, I didn't use very much Hercudet of the gas system, but Dave did quite a bit and actually did some fascinating projects where they were driving shafts into underground mines for ventilation or for other things. And he used a lot of Hercudets for that. But the non-Ls just became so standard and so simple. And then once Dyno came out with their version, and then Atlas came out with their version, it was just everybody pretty much went that direction.
So what was some of the differences there with the Hercudet and?
Well, are you familiar with Hercudets?
No, go for it. I want to hear some more about it. I don't know much about it at all.
Hercudets were a gas system, to where all you did was plumbing. You were putting tubes together with little fittings from one hole to the next or through your trunk line, and then you'd run it out, and you would have to charge the system with this gas, and then you would initiate the gas, and it would go through those lines, just kind of like a non-L. It was kind of hooked. It was hooked up differently, etc. But it was the Hercules' initial response to Ensign Bigford and their non-electric system.
Interesting. So the tubes themselves were shipped inert.
Yeah.
And you would kind of splice them together, similar to where if you were to splice two shock tubes together.
Yes.
And
yeah. Only as it was the male end was in the little fitting that you would use from one tube to the other, and you had a scissor that would cut sharply, and it would cut very straight so that connection would be good, and you'd pinch it in there. It was kind of tough to do on a cold day, but it was an interesting system. I think at the end they sold everything they had remaining off to the Japanese. I think it was somewhere in Asia anyway, and I think they used them for a while longer after that. All the licensing and everything went to them.
Really? And so it was effective, just not user friendly, I guess. Is that kind of why it lost to the newer technology?
Yeah, it was just not as easy to use. It was more flexible. You could do a lot more things with it timing wise, because just like in a non-L tube, there's timing in the pace of which the shock front goes down through the tube.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in this, it was the speed of the burn of the gas as it was going through. So if you wanted more time between this hole and that hole, you could just spool out some more tubing, hook it in real easy, and that would give you more time on the next hole if you wanted.
Okay, so you didn't have surface connectors at all. It was all, or you didn't have surface delays, let's say. It was all spliced into the trunk line, and each extra length of tubing determined the delay that you would end up having down the hole. Was there a delay in the bottom of the hole as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Each detonator had its own delay, just like electrics would have.
Mm-hmm. And all you were doing was adding the surface intervals through increased length of tube. Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting, all the different products that have come out there and how some became more popular and more adopted than others. And
sure.
But you didn't really get to use Hercudet very often, is what you're saying.
Not very. No.
Okay. And
not very.
But what was the change there from Irico to Dyno? Can you give us some insight on that and how that played in your career and in the industry even? Yeah,
more from the, I guess, the business side, because Irico buying Hercules was like the tail grabbing hold of the tiger. I mean, it was they basically were buying out of, they were already owned by Dyno, or at least partially owned. I'm not exactly sure what the ownership percentage was at the time, but Hercules had a lot more people, a lot more distributors. There were even some distributors that switched over to Atlas at that time because they just didn't want to go through the upheaval and the change. It was, I guess, interesting. I guess is the only way I can put it. But it went fine. I mean, you had a complete run of products. And what the Irico bunch brought really to the whole thing was a lot more knowledge and experience, especially when it came to bulk products, bulk slurries, and bulk emulsions. Their knowledge, and this is what I found once I left Kansas City and went out to the Northwest. They were so far advanced on the gas sensitization technology compared to what anyone else was. And at that time, it became pretty much a big battle between Irico and what was the old Hercules bunch, the combination of those two, versus Atlas and the microballoon technology. And the gassing technology is the direction that Irico went because they understood that, they knew it. Dr. Cook had been doing it with slurries and even before they had switched over to the emulsion product. But it was just the ability of doing small hole diameter gassed emulsions and what I ran into then in the Northwest really opened my eyes to the possibility of being able to do that everywhere all the time, and not doing all that dewatering and all of the battles with holes that don't work and pumps that you lose and ANFO and ANFO emulsion combinations. And I learned there in the Northwest in the early 90s that you could do that any day, every day, any diameter hole almost. And it was just made things so simple, so easy, and so efficient on the blast pattern that was the way that you really needed to progress with everything.
So I didn't know that at one point one company was trying to focus on the microspheres and the other company was focusing on chemically sensitized.
Yeah.
So what was kind of the benefits? I mean, I know the benefits of one versus the other, but why was one company focusing more on the other? Just because that's what they had patented in their techniques, or was that kind of the game at the time in sales of bulk? Was that, look, this is what we can do, this is what we can do, ours don't crush, or we can carry just the gassing agent on the back of the truck and that's it, and we can change our density better, or what were some of the conversations around that?
Well, that's what Irico was pushing, was that the ability to dial in your densities and do a little bit less, a little bit more, being able to do it quickly and efficiently, and being able to ship an inner product from your magazine location to the customer's site and be able to mix it on site as an ammonium nitrate product, not necessarily a blasting agent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that, those were all,
that's huge,
part of that process.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, the safety there in the logistics side of things. But was that still, were you having, your catalyst with this, or this was just when there was one gassing agent? This was before two gassing agents to speed things up in the winter. I mean, you said you were in the Northwest, yeah. So it was, now we got to wait 30 minutes and before, or was this, it was just in the infant stage of gassing?
Well, and that's where I believe that Irico was way ahead of everyone else because they'd been doing it for so long. Now, could they turn around and sell that and distribute it to everyone? No. Mm-hmm. And could they go from having all these heavy ANFO trucks and these bulk ANFO trucks, and could they switch their fleet out overnight? No. That's where it took a long process, because you couldn't invest in that many trucks that often. I mean, when you're in the Northwest and everything's wet all the time, every time, they were big on WR ANFOs, and we still sold some of those WR ANFOs with the guar gums and et cetera that they would mix in with and those worked well, but still you'd have to dewater first, use your WR ANFOs, and being able to go out with the bulk truck and just pump it into the hole. Now, one of the big problems that you had back then, now that I'm thinking back on it, was the fact that the product would seep through cracks and crevices, or if you had a void, you would end up with more product in there than you really wanted. And I forget how they got through that, but they ended up being able to homogenize the product to make it stiffer as it's in the hole, and so that sometimes you can even build through a void if you needed to, but you still, in the beginning, what I was first involved in is sometimes we were pumping a lot more product into that shot than what we really wanted.
Yeah, it was kind of, I've heard some people call like slop in the bag, a very liquidy emulsion, before people started making a more viscous emulsion and they started putting the water ring inside of it, pumping with that higher pressure. It is
we used to go through some pumps every year, and those
paddle pumps right before the mono pump, or
it was mono pumps mainly.
Okay, mono pumps.
Yeah.
And so I got my first hand on gas emulsion earlier on in my career up in the Northwest in some cold temperatures, and that had quite the effect on the time frame that it would take for it to rise. And if you had an inpatient blaster, they would stem on top of it too fast and it wouldn't rise. Or then if you overgassed it, you stemmed it and you came back later on and you'd see a collapse in the collar, and you had to go throw some more stemming on top of it. What were some of the interesting things that you guys worked through? You already kind of mentioned voids, and especially probably dynamic water of just, where did my emulsion go? Just what disappeared. But what were some of the other things that you guys kind of found interesting about the chemically sensitized product?
It's like you're saying is, are you giving it enough time to do its business and be able to work properly? Or is your stemmer in such a hurry to come through and get the stemming done that he's stemming on top of it and you're not getting the growth in the product that you're envisioning? And that's just knowledge and experience. I mean, I had guys like Wes Jepson and Dave Hunsaker and Boyd Hansen from the Arico group that were constantly, Lee Shetler from out in Pennsylvania, were constantly training and working with people in our blasters and our truck drivers and our stemmers to continuously educate them so that they're using the product properly. And it's just all those little things that you just mentioned, and did they put too much product in the hole, and does it take the stemming and just push it right out? It's those kind of things. You learn from it, you work through it, and you hope that you can keep your employees to the point where you can actually train them and educate them properly so that they don't do that kind of stuff.
So the Arico guys had the bulk technology and went in and purchased the initiation product and
well, when they purchased Hercules, then immediately they had nitroglycerin products. They had packaged emulsion plants.
That's in Carthage, right?
At Carthage, and they brought their knowledge of emulsions to that, because those packaged plants, were they making emulsions then? I don't think so. I think that was all an Arico combination, Hercules Arico technology, when they went to their packaged emulsions.
So the cap sensitive.
When I grew up, you had some water gels and packaged water gels that were cross-linked and and solid and had a lot of aluminum in them. The packaged emulsions seem to come on later. I'm getting my years mixed up a little bit now, but anyway,
Yeah.
that's
So was it kind of like that the bulk became the big boys, and that's why they were able to kind of take over the market, and people were moving away from NG products because they didn't like the headaches anymore, or they just realized that okay, and they kind of okay.
yeah. Well, it's a combination of storage, shelf life, and then
Cost.
how much you're using cost. Always cost. That's always plays into and the way the transition. I mean, when I first came back to the Midwest, I mean, the market was still packaged product and bagged ANFO in majority, and didn't really get into shot service and bulk in shot service in this area until into the 2000s. So it was much later that, even though that technology was available in mining and big mines, it hadn't been moved into the quarries and the small quarries like it is now.
When you decided, okay, so Irico became Dyno, and
That's right.
how did that envelope unfold while you were there? I mean, were you still in the Upper West, were you in the Midwest, or were you in the?
I was in the Northwest for 3 years, and had taken over a distributorship that was being run by Bill Garson. And Bill Garson and a lot of his people, forget how this all worked. Dyno Nobel got involved in Australia, and Bill and a lot of his people went down to Australia and Asia and took care of that Asia Pacific area for years. And then his little distributorship up there in Olympia, Washington area, I went up there and ran that for about 3 years. After that, and they sold that distributorship to Alaska Pacific Powder, which was doing the west coast of Canada and up in Alaska, and tied those all together.
And you were working there.
Yeah, I was running it, as like a general manager at the time. I helped him with the sale, and then moved back to the Midwest and was like what they called a regional manager. And I had distributorships in Illinois and Wisconsin, up in Minnesota, and then down to the Gulf Coast in Texas.
And what was it that initiated that transformation that made the Australians want to break into this, let's say, this market? Or how did that sorry
I think
formation happen?
I don't know that history. I just remember that it was Dyno, and then the people that were around ended up working in the Irico Dyno system, and then there was the transition over to Dyno, and the Irico kind of went away.
And you weren't there anymore. You had moved on to the Pacific.
Well, I was working for them because I was a wholly owned distributorship out there at the time, and that was had one of my favorite projects up there was the PGT pipeline, which was an 800+ mile pipeline that went from Canada all the way down to Redding, California. And we had to blast from Redding up over the top of the Cascades, and then come back down on the east side of the Cascades and up through Bend, Oregon, and then on up into the blasting. I kind of tailed out after you got across the Columbia River.
So you got to blast over the Continental Divide?
Project.
Did you blast through the Continental Divide, or was the Redding?
No, that's in the Rockies, not the Cascades.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know where Redding is. So
Redding is north of San Francisco.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's a nice traverse through some beautiful country there. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, it was a great project.
How long did that last?
About a year. I mean, I had to work on it longer than that. I mean, that's when Hercules, along with Bechtel research, came in and did a bunch of test blasting before I even went out there in like 91. It was before then, and they were trying to figure out if they could blast within the right of way next to an existing 36-inch gas pipeline.
Oh, wow.
And so they just kept doing the test and the test, inching up closer. And what they determined is we really can't hurt this pipeline as long as we break the rock and move the rock. If you don't break it and it doesn't move, you can hurt it. And during this project, there was a blast superintendent. He was having troubles breaking the rock because they dig out the overburden, and the first level ledge of rock that he was hitting was really hard, and underneath it was really soft. And he was getting frustrated on breaking this. They were using NG dynamite, and then cord, and then connectors, and they would put so many holes together, put a connector in, and so on down the line. He got so frustrated, he hooked them all up.
Oh, no.
No delays. He shot, I don't know, I've heard a mile, I've heard a mile and a quarter. I don't know exactly how far it was, but it was far enough that line was shut down for about 2 days while everybody investigated what the hell happened.
He shot a mile of trench.
A mile
of trench.
Instantaneous, or as instantaneous as cord,
right?
Which is pretty instant.
23,000 feet per second. So that's, yeah.
I mean, it just,
yeah.
And
I wish I could do that. I mean, I'm sure that would be a cool thing to see, but can't do that anymore.
Who's the? I'd be talking out of school. The couple of the experts that have done all the studies on this basically calculated that he hit the existing line with 25 inches peak particle.
Wow.
Didn't do a bit of damage. Didn't bother it at all.
Because he
broke the rock and released all.
He did break it though. It did the job.
He didn't break it.
And that pipeline had flow through it. Right, it was active, so that was probably quite the protection, making sure it wasn't hollow.
Yeah, they've come up with some new theories about that, and a couple of the lines we've worked with some of the people afterwards now, and it's not necessarily inches per second they worry about; it's the stress on the line itself, and they now are able to calculate the stress that it has from the inside out and the outside in, so they can pull down their pressures on their lines when you're shooting to be able to allow more stress from the outside in, and you're right, basically a little bit of wiggle.
Interesting.
In that line.
Wow.
Randy Wheeler with White can give you the more intelligent conversation on that than I can, but I learned a lot in that line of logistics of getting the dynamite there, because we were bringing in probably a couple of loads, 2 or 3 loads a week, and having to distribute it then down the lines to certain, because there were at least 3 or 4 crews working every day. So I learned a lot about the logistics of making sure that was all flowing. And then the other part was just what you can and can't do on a pipeline. And then learned that they can always have more regulators on a pipeline than they had people working on the line. I think on this line they had 6 regulators per employee working.
Wow.
Because you had inspectors on the welds, you had people that were environmentalists, and you had people that were on there for the bugs and the animals that were along the line, and then you had some Indian grounds that you were going through, so you had some Native American
representatives,
inspectors. I mean, just inspector after inspector.
And I'm assuming you guys did a good job maintain that.
Hell yeah.
So, what would be one of your? So that sounds like an interesting project there, and then you made a shift over to Buckley Powder, where you finished off your career for the most part. Spent a long time there. What was the shift there? I mean, they needed someone at that point to run that company, or how did it work for you? How did you get your foot in the door there?
Well, after I came back to the Northwest, then I ended up, they were doing away with the regional manager position, and I transitioned over to what they termed as industry sales. And so that was doing national accounts, and both marketing and sales work within a specific industry. So then I became the industry expert for the stone industry. And so you got to know the key users of explosives within that industry and the key players, etc. And it was kind of a national, get on the airplane on Monday and come back on Friday kind of a job. But it was, I learned a lot about the stone business and how to take care of them. So through that, then I would give a lot of talks and spend a lot of time then with distributors, Buckley being one of those. And I would be at meetings at which Irico Dyno would have, and I'd get up there and do my little spiel on what's going on in the stone industry and how much product they use and how much we have a share on nationally and what it's like broken down into each segment. So I got to know the Buckley people from that. That and a combination of when I was running the distributorship up in the Northwest, even though I was a wholly owned, I got to go to the DITA meetings, Dyno Explosive Distributor Organization, or I forget what the A stands for. But anyway, I would get to go to those meetings and be able to get to know the other distributors in the area, and got to know the Buckleys there too. So it was had gotten to know them over the years. And then I was still doing that job, and the owner of Maine's Explosives had passed away. And so I knew that there was a chance that they were going to sell it. So I tried to manage myself into that acquisition. They decided to hang on to the business for a while, and the daughter tried, running it herself, and she did for a while and did a good job. And then later on decided that she wanted to get out of the business. I was communicating with her about buying her business, and found out that Steve Buckley was also communicating with her about buying her business. So he called me because he was asking questions from people in Salt Lake City of, well, what's the market like? What's this? What's that? And everybody kept telling him to call Phil. So he calls me and he's asking me these questions. And I said, so you're talking to Carrie about buying her out? And he said, yeah, I am. I said, that's funny. I've been talking to her about the same thing. And so we decided just right there that was silly for us. I am so glad that he called, because I would not have wanted to try to take that on by myself and do everything that would have been necessary. And it was much, much easier to be able to allow someone that was already running distributorships and already had done acquisitions, and best thing I ever did.
Wonderful. Yeah.
But it got me back to that distribution mode, which is where I really wanted to get back to. I love being on the distribution side more than the manufacturing side, and more than even doing industry sales, even though I did enjoy that.
And why is that? Because you get to talk to your customers a lot more and help them with their problems?
I get to work with my customer and developing win-win situations. I win, they win, and listening to their needs, identifying their needs sometimes when they don't know what their needs are, and filling those needs with something that I can bring to the table, and it went really.
Do you think your early teaching goal back, all the way back, thinking of teaching, do you think that had something to do with your growth as a distributor, and helping it just helping share that knowledge of your blasting and what you see in one site versus another?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I probably got more at college from the social aspect than I did the actual classroom aspect. But I still learned how to communicate, I guess, and uh, I probably got as much from being in a fraternity and helping run that and being part of the officer group, and actually at one point was managing uh, their kitchen, and I probably got as much from that as I did from some of my other
Mhm.
classes and some of the things I did. But
Yeah, no,
it was,
absolutely. And it's you're not the first person to come on this podcast and say that you got a little bit more out of the social aspect of college than you did uh in the
yeah.
classroom. So that's kind of funny that you say that. Now, is it with that you spent a lot of years at Bucky? I mean, this became your, you know, your baby. Uh what was some of the major, let's say, wins that you found being in this distributorship and deciding, okay, yeah, oh, you're home, right? Now you're home. This is where you've decided to stay and kind of plant roots now, right? Uh, and
Yeah. Well, it brought me back to my first market that I had to identify. I mean, when I first got out here, Carl Nill, who Maine's explosives owner, handed me a roadmap and said, "Here you go. They're out there."
go to Overland Park.
And that was
Yeah.
have fun. And so I had to even find the customers. I had to figure out what they were doing, and this was very much a logistics effort with the old distributors. They were not doing shot service. They had no shot service in this general market. Down at Aurora, Missouri, which is the other part that Steve bought from Dyno when he was purchasing mains, and they kind of rolled them together. They were doing shot service, and they had some bulk trucks and things that they were using. But mains was all about packaged product in boxes, in bags, in boxes of detonators, and delivering that to the customer, and then helping the customer utilize that product. And so it was a very methodical, slow transition over to what the market is now, which is full shot service with small bulk trucks, non-electrics, and now electronics, and now drones and computer efforts, etc. So it was all kind of bringing it full evolution to where everybody else is. But it was a long process, and sometimes it wasn't the most economical thing to do. I mean, there were some times that you were better off just delivering to a customer, being able to drop it off and come back, and if the delivery was big enough, that did better than you did made on the shot down the road. That
with a lot less risk.
depending on how
Yeah,
the
with a
days
lot
go.
less risk.
Yep. Yep. But it's still a better process. It's still a more efficient blasting technique is to have a hose that you can stick in and plug in X amount of pounds. And now with all the changes in density, you can even make a variable density and regulate how you load your holes even, and the processes you go through. That and the combination of the quality and the precise timing of the electronics is really changing the industry significantly.
Since you mentioned that, what would you say you're looking forward to when it comes to the future of blasting? Yes, okay, I get you're retired, but you're still in it. Well, what's something that you're seeing, or something that you would want to see in the future here?
Well, I'm sure AI is going to enter into this at some point. I know that the industry probably can't afford that kind of thing right now, but AI is going to get easy enough to use and available enough that it will make its way down into the industry. And so you'll take your drone pictures of your shot and plug it into an AI model somewhere, and it will tell you where to drill the holes, how to time it, etc., to get the most efficient best blast that you can get without affecting your neighbors, having the most control, etc. That's going to be interesting. And they're kind of doing, I don't think they're into AI yet, but they're already doing some of that. I mean, they're taking drone pictures and having Strauss assist them in identifying where blast holes, and then using GPS to lay out your pattern. And you're going to end up taking that, and it's going to, all of the different segments of the blast are going to end up being computerized to the point where you're never passing papers. It's all off of the data gathering, and then it gets plugged into whatever it gets plugged into.
Yeah, I'm always wondering if they're going to. I've heard in Australia, they've already started to try to get people off the bench. They just don't even want anyone on the bench. They got machines that are loading for everyone and things like that. And I always kind of wondered, are they going to really phase out the blaster? I mean, I feel like they will keep the blaster. They might not have explosives engineers anymore. We might lose our job. We might be only doing podcasts, we might be screwed. But I feel like they will, and this is not necessarily a good thing, but they'll keep the blaster because they need the risk. They need someone responsible, and they need the person, to make that decision, make those calls.
Did I know during the 90s? Yeah, during the 90s, ANFO was doing blasting, or doing the blast hole loading remotely. Are they still in that process? Do you know?
We'll have to ask our listeners here to comment to see if they are, what their stories are.
They were drilling the holes. They were loading the holes remotely. And I don't know where that whole thing really.
I know that there are people who are loading remotely, drilling remotely. No doubt about that. That's definitely being done. And I know it's even being done, pushed forward underground even faster because of, the higher risk underground.
Sure.
And exposure.
Well, it's Bill Gunn they were mucking remotely.
That's right. Yeah, under their but only really in their, when they're doing the pillar robbing area. That's kind of where they stuck to the. Yeah.
Is that where they were doing it?
Yeah. And I mean, at $1 million a pillar, you'd get a little robot to go pick up some rocks too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Bring it down.
So I don't know, but I do agree with you that there is there will be with AI a big push to at least eliminate or do the calculations on which variables are more risky. Is it this seam here, or what I always see and I'm dealing with right now is okay, we have to change this in order to get this better high wall, but if you're going to pre-split, that pre-splitting itself tends to give a higher PPV. So people are complaining about VOD, or people are complaining about high vibrations, but they're getting a better final high wall. And so they're like, well, and it's a give and take, so I wonder if AI would then help mitigate that, and whether it's, and find what variables to where you can do it just enough, or something like that. There would be something interesting there. So here's another one for you. Is there a question maybe I'm not asking you that you feel like when you were coming on this podcast I would ask you? Is there something that you would like, anything here that you'd wish you'd said?
The only thing, and we've touched on it a little bit, for whatever reason, my career took me more towards the sales end, management end, even regulatory end side of the business, more so than a lot of the technical stuff. I interacted with, I guess what it was is I always knew there was a better technical person around than I was. And so I would always use them as much as I could. And what I knew and what I did, I knew enough, and I'd been to enough training sessions. I mean, Rufus Flincham was a tremendous teacher at one point within the Dyno organization. He was from out in Virginia or the Carolinas, I think. And Keith Henderson over in St. Louis area, he was unbelievable. And he took a lot of those same principles that Rufus taught, kind of honed them in even more. And so it wasn't like I was a technical dummy, but there was always someone around that was better than me, and I had no problem using it. And so as far as doing, research and a lot of technical efforts in blasting, that really wasn't my forte. My forte was kind of probably back to my coaching ideas. It was coaching other people, bringing them along, studying markets, evaluating needs, and then filling needs and making money on it.
Instead of moving the defensive line, you were moving rock.
That's right.
Coaching everyone's doing it the right way. Well, Phil, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing some knowledge here, giving me some history on Rico and the processes of transformation of the business there, and it's been fun and eye-opening. So I really appreciate you coming on.
All right. I hope there's something worthwhile in this.
Oh, 100%. I'm sure more people are going to want to have you back on. Well, thank you very much.
All right.
Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Blast Report podcast. I want to thank the team at Blast Think for producing this show, and please follow along for more episodes in the future, and share this podcast with your colleagues so we can continue to honor our industry and the people in it. Be safe and have a blast.